Today we're going to be doing a review on two budget RC cars which can get you into the hobby for cheap. So right here we have the MN78 and we have the MN82. So on the left, the MN82 is based off a Land Cruiser pickup truck. It's 1/12 scale and it's officially licensed by Toyota. On the right we have a imitation, more like a replica of the Jeep XJ from I'd say 80s to 90s. It's 1/12 scale and they're both very similar. Now there's some differences, but these are both entry level and we're going to explain the pros and cons. So here we have a very detailed RC car. It's pretty big. If you compare it to 1/10 scale, 1/10 is a lot larger, but it's still a decent size. You see my hand, so it's pretty big in size. This is about, I don't know, 2-inch wheel, I'd say, 2.5 inch. So in my opinion, the best thing about this car is how detailed the actual body is. I mean, you even have opening doors if I can get them open, and we'll take a look at the inside. You can see it's dirty because I did use it in the swamp, but you can really take this apart and detail it even more if you wanted to. It does come with exterior parts such as the door handles, the mirrors, windshield wipers. It also comes with this exterior cage on the roof and lights which do function, and we are also going to flip it around. You could even open up the back end. You could store some stuff in there, although when you put some things in here and you're actually using it, this doesn't stay closed that easy, not like the front doors which you saw earlier. So one thing I'm going to point out immediately, the wheels are not what we're used to. They actually go in with a screw, and it comes with this tool which is very small. My main issue with these screws is that they rot out. They are probably of a cheap metal, some cheap quality metal, so when you expose them to water, they get real rusty. My concern is, I hope that it doesn't strip out over time. This car's been sitting a little while and I did have to wash it recently since I used it in mud, and that's how the wheel looks. And I'll show you on the other truck, which is new, how that looks. So here we're going to flip it around. We're going to open up the hood and show you where the batteries go. So this is the battery compartment. It's very simple. It's a 2-cell, comes with the car, comes with a charger. You put it in there and that's about it. You can definitely do better with the power. I'd say it lasts a decent amount of time, but the main issues that I have with this car is really in terms of power. It could be something related to the motor, battery, or computer. So I'm going to flip over the car and we're going to take a look at that. So here we have the underside of the car. It's built pretty well, but I'm going to point out some deficiencies. As you know, it's a very cheap car. You could get this car for anywhere from $60 to $100, depending on who you order it from, how fast you want it. So you have plastic drive shafts. That's already one problem, although I have not experienced problems with that. I believe the gearing and the axles right here and here are plastic, which can be upgraded, or you could just upgrade the entire axle for metal, which helps a lot because this car is very, very top heavy. Your frame, I believe on this one, is metal, so that is actually pretty nice because not all of these come with that. Your shocks can be upgraded, but these shocks are decent. I'm not really going to touch them. That's not my issue. The servo is fine. I mean, this truck isn't that heavy. I haven't really had issues with it, but again, a lot of plastic in the cheaper cars, so those are always things you can upgrade. Now, the main issues I have on this car come from the motor assembly. So the motor's right in here. The motor is very small for a truck of this size, especially with such a big body. The main issue I have, which you'll see in our test driving videos, is on a lot of approaches where you would slip your wheel or your tire would slip trying to bite traction. Instead of that happening, my power cuts because there's not enough power to be delivered to the wheels. So basically, it has too much traction, not enough torque. So I'd say this is probably a combination of both the motor being too small and underpowered, as well as the ESC not being able to deliver power properly. So my recommendation with this truck, if you're actually going to do any type of off-roading with it other than just driving on dirt, is upgrade the electronics, upgrade the motor, upgrade the ESC. I'd recommend do the computer first, the ESC, and then the motor, because that will probably have a big change on its own. But with a better ESC, you'll probably burn out the motor anyways, so it's a good upgrade to do on both ends. So that's about it when it comes to this truck. At the end of the video, we'll do some light functions so you can see the light functions on both vehicles, but there's not much to it. It's a great beginner vehicle. You know, $100 as you get into the truck, you know, as things break, as things have issues, and you'll be able to upgrade the truck and have it running really good. And you could put in a lot more money. You could have metal wheels. For example, these are the OEM wheels. I actually 3D printed some wheels. They're US mag wheels. That's a design. They stick out more, they're wider, give me a better approach angle, and I think they look cool. So at least better than these little wheels, which did not work for this truck. But past that, we're gonna move on to the next vehicle. So here we have the Land Cruiser truck. So first off, we can already tell the truck is very well detailed. You can see the lights even have the turn signal. You can see the different pieces for the bumper. But when you really get into it, you notice that it doesn't have as much detail in certain aspects. For example, the doors do not open, only the tailgate opens, which is a bit of a bummer considering they're about the same price. But for how detailed this truck is, it's very cheap. I mean, it just is a really good entry level, the same as the Jeep Cherokee. So we're gonna take a look at the back, spin it around. You can see working tailgate. This does not come painted. I had to do that myself. You can put decals on the side of it that come with the truck, but I chose not to. In terms of the actual assembly, it's about the same, except you have a plastic frame in this truck. Not that it matters much. This truck is very light. You know, it's if anything, it's helpful. You also have a leaf spring suspension, which you did not have on the other truck. So that's actually pretty realistic, and it's pretty cool because it's adjustable. You could take out leaf springs, add in leaf springs if you wanted to. You could do similar upgrades. The upgrades vary. You could do metal drive shafts, you could do metal axles, metal gearing, all of that. It's just basic starter. What we're actually gonna do is we are going to do a video where we can directly compare this truck with the Jeep to see what is going to perform better in a track setting where you're doing some off-roading, you have some aggressive approaches, some mud. One thing you want to consider is water and these electronics for both of these trucks. Not the best mix. That's another upgrade you want to do. If you're going to be off-roading in water and rain, you may want to consider that upgrade because you'll probably have some issues with the computer and issues with your car driving. So that's a upgrade to consider. So we're going to do a direct comparison side by side. So here we are side by side. And if you look at these trucks, you may notice something a little bit weird. So if you look at it from the top view, it's most noticeable. There is actually a size difference between these trucks, a large size difference, which seems very off, even though both of these trucks are 1/12 scale. A lot of Americans, I know you haven't seen this Land Cruiser in person, but it's no different than some of these Land Cruiser pickup trucks. It's pretty similar. For example, a 4Runner, it's pretty big in size, but it's not smaller than an XJ, for example. An XJ truck is not a full-size SUV. I'd say it's a medium-size SUV, especially compared to what we have out there now. And it's definitely not, you know, this small compared to an XJ. I mean, this scale makes the XJ look like a monster truck in my comparison. So it's just a little bit off. In my opinion, you know, it's not the end of the world. It's not some crazy thing. I mean, at the end of the day, this is hobby grade. They both look really nice. You can definitely work on some things, but there's not much you can do to change that. You maybe put bigger tires on the Land Cruiser, but even then, I like my trucks to look scale. I don't want them to look like a toy, basically, so I try to modify them correctly. So if you look at the trucks, you could also see another thing I wanted to point out. This truck, the XJ, has bigger tires from another model with the wheels that I made. You can tell this truck has a lot of ground clearance, right? Almost the same as the Land Cruiser. The difference is this Land Cruiser is stock. These are stock tires, stock bumper height. So I got the XJ first, and then this Land Cruiser came out. I picked it up as soon as it came out. I noticed that the Land Cruiser is simply better designed. I think that they kind of realized some of the weaknesses of the XJ and maybe some of their older models and just simply improved on them. Now, that doesn't mean that you have, you know, perfect electronics, perfect gearing, but it's a lot better than it was before in the XJ. So You can also see, actually, let me show you directly. This is the original wheel. It's a little bit smaller, but with this wheel on, it brings down the height of the truck, and you have a lower approach angle and a lower departure angle on your front and rear bumpers. So it's just a little bit harder, especially being such a big vehicle. It's a little bit harder to off-road than the Land Cruiser is. So depending on what you want to do with your budget builds, this is a good entry level, at least from MN. We have plenty of other entry level RC cars which are really good to get into, especially if you don't want to get into a 1/10 scale, which may be a little bit overwhelming being that it's such a big truck. These are a lot smaller. You know, you could probably fit this in a backpack. You can buy a case for it. It's very easy to work on. You know, you're at a size where it's small enough that it's easy to put away, easy to keep out of sight, easy to transport, but it's also easy to work on because it's big enough for that. I know it's a good in-between. 1/10 scale is a lot easier to work on than this, but let's say 1/18, much harder to work on in terms of electronics or gearing. It's much smaller pieces, and you really have to be careful with what you're doing, especially if you don't have an eye for those things. So this is a great entry level if you want to learn about RC cars. I'd even say that working on these cars would make you even better prepared for getting into 1/10 scale because they're very, very similar. And even then, my personal opinion, I love 1/10 scale, but I also love this scale. So as long as I have 1/10 scale cars, I will still have 1/12 scale because they are awesome. And sometimes I just want a light little truck that I can throw around and not worry about. And hopefully we'll get into some modifications. So let me know what type of mods you want to see on these cars. And for the meantime, before we get to do those mods, we're going to do some direct comparisons. So for the next video, we're going to be taking these two trucks on a road course for off-roading. We're going to see how they do in some swamp water. We're going to do some approaches, some departures, and they're going to perform directly against each other. So you'll be able to see what issues each of these vehicles encounter, what type of upgrades you might want to consider, and which truck is a better deal considering they're both in the same price range. So we'll see you next time.